I have lots of fun butchering of French names. The first time I started calling on people in Louisiana,
Yeah,
like,
well, that's different French. That's Cajun
right.
French,
Yeah,
so.
I was like, "Oh, Mr. Fontenot," and he
Yeah.
was like, "It's Fontenot."
Yeah.
Like, I am an idiot.
I was in New Orleans once, and I asked a woman like a deli shop, how do you say that word? And it was couchon, which means pig, and she said couchin. I was like, okay, you're not as Cajun as you were advertising. So
couchin. What was the Snowflake news?
I mean, just the last couple of weeks, there was like a data or like a cybersecurity deal. But
how did that originally come out? It was somebody like leaked a bunch of shit, right?
that I'm not even sure. It just kind of came up like they ended up sending something to make sure you're using MFA if you're not already, and like we have like IP whitelisting that you can put around it, but really like everything I've read about it just comes down to like the tools were there for people to protect themselves. Just
you mean not using the default passwords on my database is a bad idea? How many hacks have occurred because of that?
Well, it's so easy just to use MFA these days,
especially now.
Yeah, and they bake it in through Snowflake with Duo, or you can use your own authenticator.
100%. Yeah.
No, I mean, I've been using Authy and Authenticator, Google Auth, whatever, for years because of crypto. And I remember the first time I did it, I'm like, man, this is annoying, but it's really cool because it's like and now everything has 2FA. So it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, and what's cool now is I've seen some that are going passwordless, and you're just looking up your code, and maybe it's combined with a PIN or something. Yep. And so you don't have the 2 steps, but you have the dynamic just on my phone approach.
Yeah. No, I like the 2 most functional ones I've come across. HubSpot uses 2FA, but it's like if you have it on your phone, just like Gmail or whatever, right? It asks you every login attempt and you approve it. Or just like the magic link. Like I know it's annoying to go back to your email, but that's way easier than remembering your password.
Yeah, it just sends you the link.
It just sends you the link.
Yeah.
But no, that's the never ending trend on the security side is use the security tools that people offer.
Yeah, humans
practices.
are always the point of entry.
Yeah. 100% of the time.
Well, there's one company I heard about that they, never mind. Let's skip that one. I probably shouldn't tell that story.
So speaking of Snowflake, I assume you guys do a lot in Snowflake with different customers and stuff. How have you used Snowflake over the past couple of years?
Yeah, admittedly, it's one of those, we were talking about this earlier, that do you bring a bazooka to a knife fight, right? And so a lot of things that we do is very much within the Microsoft stack. And we love that because we just inherit our enterprise clients' existing security.
Right.
Just give me a login. And once we have that, then we can operate within their ecosystem, usually a combination of their Power Platform, like Power BI is the most popular, but Power Apps and Power Automate, as well as their Azure or AWS instance. And so we can inherit all of that. So I actually don't think too much about cybersecurity because when they ask that question, it's like, mine is yours. And it just kind of sends that question right through. So pretty easy to get running quickly.
Yeah. Are you seeing a lot of people using Snowflake these days?
I feel like that was like the option 5 years ago, as far as like really adaptive data models for machine learning and AI. But a lot of people are picking up much more native tools or the MongoDBs of the world to make it, to just take on a little bit different flavor. And there's just so much ingrained toolkits now within some of the clouds that when you go standalone now, if you're starting today, you're signing yourself up for some heavier maintenance and longevity costs.
It's always the pro con, right? It's like,
totally.
Oh, well, Microsoft can do it, but now I'm locked into Microsoft.
Yeah. And so it's like, it'll change every 5 years, or at least threaten to change every 5 years and renegotiate.
Yeah. I mean, I think the problem, like say Microsoft on the data side until maybe recently, and we'll see if, Fabric is the panacea that they are pitching it to be, but they've really struggled in the data warehousing, the data lake side of things. Like they, I think also there was like Teradata and everything was able to do some of this heavy processing like on-prem. And that's, I remember when I started at Conoco in 2014, it was like, ooh, we got Teradata, which again, not to knock it. It's a great engine, but it's more an on-prem kind of thing. Then the cloud became a much bigger deal. And then Redshift, kind of took the world by storm on AWS and able to use that multi-parallel processing columnar kind of stuff in the cloud with a Postgres data flavor. but even that, like, it's just, if you blink, everything passes you by. And then all of a sudden, like, Snowflake came in and it was just like, wow, I just turn it on and it works. Our BigQuery is really similar. If you are looking at a more native tool on GCP, but Microsoft has really kind of struggled. I mean, like over the last 7 or 8 years, I'm looking at it and it was Azure Data Warehouse, and then they rebranded to Synapse, and now it's Fabric, and it's kind of hard to tell, is this just another repurposed garbage, or is this actually an all cohesive, platform that's actually going to like solve a lot of people's problems?
Well, and I think you just talked about kind of the evolution we're seeing in the industry. And so Microsoft seems to be kind of going through that own internal evolution. And as they learn, they're adapting and rebranding and repackaging things. But, technology is moving so fast these days that the tech companies have to keep up. But I think where, the enterprise clients are is where's your home base, right? Establish your own home base that allows you a lot of flexibility and agility to keep going. But pick up the new tools as they're value adding. And I think that's the key thing, is what's value adding, right? If you can use a SQL database and it achieves your objectives and it doesn't sacrifice something for the future, use it, right? And so I feel like blockchain was such a big thing, like probably like 2016, 2017, where everybody's like, oh, I need blockchain. I was like, you just need a database. You want to go from paper to a blockchain, and like there's no issues with you don't need a distributed ledger to help with that no trust kind of approach. And it's just like, pick the right tech, let's just put an Excel. That's better than your paper exercise.
Well, I remember John and I went to, there was a blockchain conference at UT, and this guy, Jimmy something, like Asian dude, had wear a cowboy hat. Like, he's pretty popular in the Bitcoin world ever, but like, he's just like, it's just a fucking database with rules. Like, and the big thing is like, and I think I see this a lot in different technology now, like databases and everything were everything was all wrapped in a tightly coupled thing. And now it's really, everything's just been turned inside out. So like a blockchain is just a database that's turned inside out. And now like you need a cohort of people that agree on these rules. And that's the hardest part. Again, the people part of the people, processes, and technology. That's people and processes part of the blockchain is the hardest thing. And it's been turned inside out, but it's at the end of the day, it's a database. You can do those same rules. And if it's something you're doing internally, then you're in control of those rules anyway, so you don't need blockchain. Like you said, to your point, you just need a database.
100%. Yeah, it's when you have that external no trust kind of approach, and you want that distributed network, I think is really where it starts to unlock value.
Yet another beautiful point of Bitcoin. It's like, I mean, when you really think about like the psychology of how the code works and like how it incentivizes people, and they knew that they were going to need incentives in order to keep the network going and growing and all this stuff, and over generations, not just a few years. It's pretty crazy to think of all the foresight that kind of went into all that.
Well, and what I'm excited about, particularly in the blockchain space, is more of the distributed computing. And so today you're just crunching purely to process the transaction. But I think Polkadot was one of the first quality ones out there. Read about it like 2 years ago. But if we think about the natural gas Bitcoin rigs today, that's just creating coins. But what about distributed computing power? And so you could literally compute wherever you have an existing energy source, instead of having to transport it a long distance. And
now I mined, I think it's called Theta, for a long time on a laptop that I just had sitting at the house. And their whole concept is basically distributed caching for streaming services and just high compute loads. But it's like, you can literally have it on your laptop, have it on your phone. And you could imagine this world where it's like, oh shit, everyone has this. Apple buys whoever, and now it's baked in on everybody's phone, and they literally have the largest distributed compute network in the world. And so Bobby's phone is buffering the video that I'm watching, and like all this crazy, it's going to be crazy.
Are you sure you're going to talk about Silicon Valley?
Right. The
show.
I love that show. That's a great show.
One, and what it could potentially mean is that all you really need is a screen and a Wi-Fi card or cell card. And then all of your computing power is done elsewhere. Right? And so we think about, just minimizing consumption on the masses. You don't need full CPU on every single device that you have. You just send it into the cloud and it's taken care of. And it could be 10 feet away or 10,000 miles away.
And then I think with 5G is what's going to make some of that more possible too. Because like, again, it's great that you can compute, but then you got to transmit the data and stuff too. But I mean, now what you can do wirelessly with stuff like that, or Starlink, or the low orbit satellites, and again, it just everything accelerates so fast. I mean, we've seen it with AI, but it's all across the spectrum. It's the compute power, which has made the AI possible, or it's all interconnected. But
well, that's one of the things I love about the Industrial Revolution 4.0. I feel like 1, 2, and 3 was just around mechanical advantage, then electrical advantage, and then that combination of like Henry Ford and process optimization, and then the semiconductor. With 4.0, it's not one specific technology. It's just that there's a whole group of technologies that have gotten good enough. Yeah. And now the theories that came out in the 1950s from machine learning, you can actually go do something with. And so it's just like so powerful. And people are like, oh, we're on 5.0 with AI now and the large language models. But I just think it's going to be a continuous, because if you look at historically, it was 100 years and 70 years, and then smaller and smaller, and I think you just get into this kind of continuous innovation cycle.
Well, then the quantum computing is going to blow everything on its tail. I mean, quantum computing. I mean, all the security stuff, like, oh, your 56-bit encryption, I can solve that in 8 seconds, or whatever.
I read something that China and the US are storing all of the intercepted documents that they can't crack that are encrypted, and they're just hoping in like 3 or 4 years they can just crack everything.
Waiting for the quant to come down. That's crazy.
I was like, oh, that's actually kind of clever, but scary as heck.
But then when that's going to be combined with the AI or the models and stuff, that just what they're going to crunch through the data is insane. And then again, just data creation. It's it's not a new story, but I mean, it's just we're creating so much data like every literally second or millisecond.
Well, if we really think about it, all the industrial revolutions is really around driving down costs, driving up productivity, and then the cleverness is how do you apply that in a value-adding way? And so it's the businesses like the Fords of the world that were able to apply a little bit of technology and a little bit of clever process to unlock an entirely new industry. So 20 years, you went from all horses to all cars, and so just night and day difference.
Incredible when you really think about it.
In the early 1900s, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is it's like if you would have asked the people of the day what they wanted, a better horse, like a faster horse, or more endurance.
But the only thing that changed from their perspective is it went from $250,000 to like 30 grand. It's like, okay, now I can afford this. So
that's true.
Yeah. And then it kind of brings up, so I think there's a guy I've shared his stuff with you quite a bit, but Kyle Body, he's on the baseball side of the world, but he does a ton with all different kind of technology and how they use it. It's called Driveline Baseball or whatever, but he's been helping out.
Great follow, by the way. Yeah. He puts out a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah. No, whether you nerd out on baseball or just tech, I mean, he knows a lot, but I think they had a Wall Street Journal article came out because he's consulting with the Red Sox, and I think they had a little blurb in there about him, but his whole thing was like with this AI stuff, like you kind of to your point about people would want just a better horse or whatever, but he's like, a lot of people don't have the creativity to like think how to use this. You have to show them like the value, like, and if you can just, sometimes you can't sit there and talk about it, you just got to go do it and you got to show them. And then then people will understand the value. But it takes a visionary too, to just like, that can really understand that there's value there. But, sometimes you just got to like, look, here's something I did.
Like, you got to show.
And people can see what the value is. Otherwise they're gonna be like, oh, well, I don't need that.
No, that's a huge just product startup company hack in general that I've really learned working here, honestly, is that you can talk about it all day long, but showing a customer, even if a crappy POC is way better than just trying to describe it on a PowerPoint slide in most cases.
A demo is worth 1,000 slide decks for sure. So.
Absolutely.
So with your company, I guess we kind of jump right into it.
Let's introduce Josh. And
we've got Josh Politte from his Act Solutions
and consulting.
And again, you guys do, I know a lot with the Microsoft Power Platform and different solutions, but I'm sure across the board. But I mean, what's been your experience, say, with whether it's AI or different things, but on that kind of like getting customers or people to understand the value of certain solutions that you either have or that you think could be useful to them?
Yeah, you're uniquely suited to answer this because the managers are like, oh, well, another data solution. Like, what do I need that for? But you guys are actually doing a lot of really good, like, tangible stuff, right? Like that.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about. It's all about the value add, right? And so start with the business problem, and people in IT really struggle with change management, and it's a huge pain point and struggles to get the value. But when you change something that somebody wants and like they're complaining about, then there's still some change management. It's going to take a little time and effort to get over the hump, but then they're going to use it because it solves a problem for them. And so we do both the strategy side and the kind of the brainstorming as well as the execution. And so we start on the business side and do a brainstorming workshop and really consolidate the all the pain points.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that I found that a lot of people struggle with is they want to go pick a single pain point and just solve that. When you build that portfolio of pain points, you can really take a step back and say, okay, over the next 6, 12 months, here's the combination of things that we can do that solves this one 100%, that one 30%. And you can really build some momentum around a transformation program.
Yeah. Quickly. So as far as like, say, working into a company and kind of trying to create that roadmap or the, or where do you find like the most traction? Because I mean, sometimes you hear like the best ideas come from the bottom up, but then sometimes again, like you really need buy-in from the top to, to kind of really push things down and make, or I mean, again, sometimes there's people in the middle, but like where have you found the most?
I think that generally speaking, it's someone that's close enough to the work. So I would say director level or VP will a lot of times engage us initially. They're saying, but they've been talking with their people and saying, what are your pain points? And everybody's saying the same thing. They're like, okay, we need to do something about it. And so if I was going to give one advice to a business, it's just listen to your people. What's keeping them from helping achieve the business outcomes on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Yeah. Enabling your employees to do what you hired them to do it's a oddly hard thing for most people to do.
And a lot of times it's driven by finance, right? Do you have a framework that allows you to give credit for productivity? And some companies really struggle with that. They want cold hard cash, kind of impact or get out of here kind of thing.
Yeah.
So how do you mitigate that on the consulting data side of things? Because I'm sure there's plenty of people listening who are in these companies trying to implement change or want to have all these problems that they want to fix, but they can't figure out either how to sell it to management or, how to frame it up right. Even I think, in my opinion, that's a lot of the times the problem, right? Is like engineers we're not very good at selling things. We've never been in sales most of the time. And so we're not very good at communicating effectively on a value proposition, generally speaking. And so I think that also happens a lot too, right? Where it's just like, yeah, there is a problem, but they can't communicate the value or the relative impact that the solution to that problem might have.
My experience has been the closer you can get to the bottom line, the easier sell it is.
Yeah.
But also don't overbake it. Figure out what your value case is that kind of justifies it, but don't go overdo it. And so a lot of times in our business, we're making pretty heavy risk-based decisions, right? And so if you're a production engineer designing workovers, you inevitably are making intentional decisions on how best to manage the risks that go on during an operation. And so if you can be higher consistency, higher quality, and how you develop those procedures, then you can deliver consistently, and that mitigates risk. And ultimately, if you don't drop a tool in the hole, that saves you cost. You can get revenue back up. And so it's just creating that kind of link of if we do X, which really drives a decision, then and that decision has consistent higher quality outcomes, then here's how it's going to impact it. And so there's that loose relationship. But where I think early on when I was leading this at a Fortune 500 company, where we struggled, we tried to tell everything, right? Oh, it'll do that, and it'll also save time, and then this will help our culture, and here's all the ways it'll help our culture. And it's just like, just do the least. And there's a lot of questions about that. Just risk it. Say like, if we only achieve 5% of this value, still lucrative. And usually that's how it is with these things. It's very, very attractive with compounding impacts you don't even have to include.
Yeah. I think that's the big thing too, right? Is it's like you have a bunch of these little problems, but a lot of them end up having the same root of like, well, if we had all of our data structured in a database, we wouldn't have all these issues. Or if we didn't have data coming in from 20 different vendors in 20 different formats, we wouldn't have all these issues. And it's like, that might end up causing a dozen different problems. And so, if you just present it as, oh, well, this is one little problem, but finding the root to your point, it's like, oh, well, shit, all of these problems come from one thing. So it's actually way more impact. Like these things compound. And I feel like that's the hardest thing to communicate most of the time,
right?
Especially to management of like, if we do this, then this can happen, which means this. And this is really all the root of a bunch of different problems, not just one little thing. And so being able to find those compounding problems and point them out, I think is normally it's a faster path normally to being able to get
And it brings me back to kind of building those list of pain points and that portfolio of opportunities. Because a lot of times if you go solve one,
right,
it tends to be the sexiest one, but it might be the most complex and you need things from other things, like 3 other data sources.
Yeah.
So just go solve those first. But if you have that roadmap, you know that you're solving 10 other things partially and it's enabling further things along. So tends to be the less sexy path, but it builds program momentum and allows people to really see the art of the possible.
Yeah. Well, I think that too. And then also, you know, when you build that roadmap, maybe you can shuffle things around and realize that there's a dependency.
Yeah.
That this one needs to come first.
Yeah.
And like, if you really want to get here, I got to do this first.
Yep.
If you want to do it right. I mean, yeah, we can skip a step and do that, but then it's going to cause other like second order consequences.
Yeah.
One thing you hit on, and someone had a LinkedIn post about this past week, and I'd like to get your thoughts, is they basically said like time is not a value proposition. Like saving time is not a value proposition. And whether you agree or disagree, I think it's thought provoking because in the end, like we always talk time is money, but like, and I've fallen in that trap too, but it can be really hard to quantify like actually how much time you're saving. And then, you know, now this, you know, if I'm saving 5 hours per person times their hourly rate, blah, blah, now it's this, but maybe you can kind of get to that, but like, it's almost, I think you need to find more concrete business, you know, impact than just like, it's going to save people time.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's an easy one to kind of throw out there and then no one can really validate it necessarily or not if they haven't really outlined how much time it's taking to do these processes. Like,
so I heard maybe 2 or 3 kind of challenges with that approach. I think I read that LinkedIn post though. What were they saying you should do instead? Remember?
Again, I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
I started getting into the comments.
Yeah.
And, a little bit, but
fair enough. Yeah. So to me, there's a few ways to approach it. First one is take a baseline. So usually it's a survey. How much are you spending on this process?
Yeah.
And then when you have enough people doing it, which often is the case, you just take one that's after the fact, and that, you know, everybody's going to have a distribution of what their answers are, but you at least see the mean shift. So that's a really effective way to demonstrate that. And the other piece is just general job satisfaction. No one likes to hit Control C, Control V. So if
you'd be surprised.
Fair enough.
They think they like it until they realize there's
better ways. Yeah. Well, and so I think that a lot of times though, where the other value prop is that consistency or quality, and it tends to be the elephant in the room. No one wants to say I'm doing a bad job, which you aren't. You're just human. And so if you allow machines to help with the low level stuff that you're more likely to make human mistakes on, then it just drives higher consistency outcome.
Yeah, computers don't have fat fingers.
Yeah, or need to sleep or never hungover. So
they make. I mean, they, even when they do mess up, they will mess up in the same way. So like,
in a consistent way. Then like at least you programmatically
and then you root it out, and eliminate
Once
it.
you find the one error, you're like, oh, okay, now I can find all the rest of them because they're all going to be relatively the same.
Yeah.
That's one of the things like I've been using language models for like data extraction and stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's not perfect by any means, but I was showing you earlier, like I can feed a bunch of docs in and extract the metadata from those docs without me having to manually open them and go through them and find the title, author, publish date, all of this stuff. And it's like some of them, for whatever reason, the first time I did it, it's like it didn't read the PDF or OCR the PDF. And so it just made up a title and an author, but it made up the same title and author every single time it had that issue. So once I noticed that first one, I was like, oh, okay. Sort, filter, okay, there they are. Just manually do those. And, it was, an 85% solution, which beat the hell out of doing it by hand.
Brute force.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, and I think the interesting thing and where I'm seeing more and more successful application of LLM is that very value-driven approach. Like I need an output. How can I get this? Let me use the tools at my discretion. But let's say it was 60% were having issues. What you possibly could have done was, but 95% get the titles right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could extract those and then go find a database to extract the rest of the metadata. Right. And so it's just having that, I'm an engineer by training, mechanical engineer. And so my approach to everything is how do I apply this technology, not how do I create new technology? And it's, let's just get the most efficient, highest value answer quick in place so we can create value.
So let's talk about like how you and or your company is applying AI. I mean, how are you, or LLMs, like, are you using them? Like, how are you using them personally? I mean, I'm sure there's probably personal use cases that you're using them, but then also, say through like the Power Platform or Microsoft, like have you been able to utilize, stuff out of whether Azure Cognitive Services and so on, and like, how's that worked, kind of applying those to the business?
So me personally, I'm ChatGPT, just go straight there for any of the, I'll call it the creative things that I enjoy doing, but is usually, you have that writer's block when you sit down to write either a blog post or, long form content of any sort. And so go there to just kickstart it. But for one prospective client, they were looking at a few different options to solve a particular problem. And I just went to ChatGPT and said, what are the top 5 or top 10 best in class softwares that for this kind of use case, and are able to find some additional ones. And I just said like, hey, don't use us if you can find a third party software. So I just sent that back to them and let them run with it.
Sure.
And so use it for that kind of Google Plus, if you will, right? And so I'm going to go to Google to do something, might as well cut out the going to 10 websites, extract all the details. And just get the curated answer. But looking for more and more ways on the functional side. So business owner, right? So you spend a lot of time on the HR, the finance and marketing and sales side. And so it's really lifting a lot of that creativity and mundane things from doing that.
Yeah.
As far as application with clients, very value driven. And this is probably not popular in tech, but my entire tech strategy is let's find the simplest technology that achieves the value without sacrificing the long-term thing. Or the long-term value of it, or long-term vision, sorry. And so we've used it very little at this point.
Sure.
We help people move from just spreadsheets and a very manually driven process to an automated process and a stewardship of people through that process. But where we're starting to play with a lot more is bolting on the co-pilots or virtual agents, if you will, at the end. And so you can just kind of interact with your data in a more meaningful way. So instead of opening up a dashboard every day at 8 a.m. to say, which projects do I need to go focus on today? You can pop in a quick chat in Teams or whatever, and ask the bot that, and it'll curate that list for you.
Nice.
Are y'all using any, or have you had any experience using any of the Azure AI tools or platform or any of that stuff? And how has it been?
We played around with it. We use Azure Portal for a lot of hosting services as a backend to some of the Microsoft Power Platform. Specifically on the AI, I was telling you earlier around one of the use cases we had was around capturing French and then translating that into a transcript and then translating that into English and giving people a kind of a history of different use cases depending on the language it is. And it took a day. So this stuff is like insanely fast when you adopt that kind of prepackaged, ready to go technology and have the tools to connect everything together. You're talking about inverting the databases earlier.
Yeah.
Same thing's happening with the tools. It's pick your kind of central tool and then just go find the right tool for a task X and then be done with it when you're done with that task and go find the next tool for task one.
Yeah. That's the good and the bad thing about all the AI open source stuff, right? Is it's like there are so many tools, which makes it really nice, but then it's also overwhelming because it's like there's always a new one or they constantly change and stuff. But it's you're right. It's like you have all the building blocks you need,
right?
And from multiple sources in most of the cases. So it's just assembling it how you want to assemble it.
And now with like APIs or Zapier and stuff like that, like you can just, all right, well, if this works for what I need to do, I'll set it up here and I can just call it from another platform.
Right. Or Power Automate.
Yeah, exactly.
But and like before the enterprise technology approach, and I saw this in the enterprises, was we're going to do a study. We're going to do identification, and then we're going to look at all the different options for this and then select it. And what I've done, and I would recommend to anybody, is invert that around. It's here's my core toolkit. If can I get these to do my use case? If the answer is yes, use that. Then trigger. If the answer is no, then trigger that longer ID cells.
Yeah. Well, even just like the Whisper API, I remember the first time I used it, and it's like 2 lines of code, and you're like, holy shit! Like 2 lines of code, and you can translate or transcribe literally anything.
Yeah,
it was nuts.
Yeah,
it's.
Yeah. Well, I think like you're saying though too, like, trying to stay in a kind of a narrower, tighter like toolkit like, that you really understand is important. I mean, I was talking with our IT guy, one of our softwares, we've been having just issues with them. But they've got our dev version of our, one of the databases is on like Azure, one's on AWS, another one's on this open metal, and then somehow the VPN stuff broke, but it's like, they can't get make heads or tails, and they can't figure out how to do it because they're trying to balance like 5 different platforms.
Right.
Like if they were just doing it through one platform, they would be the expert on it. They would know how to use, how to set up the subnets or VPNs and stuff through that. But because they're spread so thin across, and well, now I got to go figure out how open metals or services work. And it's like, no, just be good at a handful of things, and you can probably, like you said, solve probably 85-90% of the problems with those.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and you touched on something that I wasn't even talking about, is really the talent piece, right? And so when you use that consistent toolkit, you create experts, and you don't want to have to source other talent or train people up. It just slows you down. So thinking about all those things that create waste or additional kind of lag in a project.
Well, and then it's like, again, on the talent side, the fact that you're leaning into like Microsoft. I mean, every kid in America gets taught how to use Microsoft. In schools and everything, basically at this point. I mean, it's, but at a higher level, even professionally, most people are interacting with, at the very least, Excel and some other, the
SharePoint,
Microsoft Office, all that side of it. But so you brought up Power Automate, and I think that's something I'd definitely like to talk about. like, I have this vision that I'd love to do it. I probably need to do it more just internally. I have I have the power to probably do it or put it in place. The capacity is probably becoming more and more, available as I have more people coming on. But I'm always astonished, like how few people like know how to use like Power Automate or like, I mean, we pay for this enterprise license of Microsoft Office, and there's just so much untapped value. I think that people don't even realize, and it wouldn't be that hard to train business users on how to even use basic Power Automate. Or those tools. But I remember even telling my CEO at University of Lands a couple of years ago, I was like, this makes my skin crawl. But like, if we just teach half the people how to record a macro, that'd be so much more. They don't even know that's available to them,
right?
But I mean, there's these free in the sense of we're paying for this, like tools that we don't need to go, use XYZ RPA tool. Like you've got one built into your platform that's federated, and you can use your authentication and everything with it.
What are some interesting use cases you guys have seen on the Power Automate side, or some really cool things that y'all have done with it? Because I've got a lot of experience in Zapier, but it's effectively the same thing. And so like, I am a big fan of them, especially in smaller companies, because they are so like, instead of writing an API script and then making it a service, I just click a few buttons and it's done, right? Like,
and so you actually talked about 2 separate softwares there, and it gets confusing because they're both called Power Automate. But Power Automate Desktop is the RPA version, and so that's record a macro on your desktop. And I haven't played with them much yet, but some of the AI tools they're putting on top of that is just ungodly. And so,
and then I was thinking more about the one in the cloud. I mean, I guess I was thinking RPA, but in the sense of, I knew there were desktop flows or whatever you could do.
So then what you're talking about, John, is the cloud-based, and it's exactly what you're talking about, right? So if you need to move data from A to B, that's the most common and widely used case. And so a lot of times it's just somebody sent me an Excel, I extract the data, I want to put it in a database. But what you can do a lot more with that is once you're using third-party softwares, then you can apply that in a meaningful way. And so we actually have an API into ArcGIS, so really common mapping software in oil and gas. And I don't know if you've ever used it, but it's definitely feels like it was built 20 years ago, which it was. Super powerful, but just really difficult to use and costly resources to hire to do that. And so we tunneled in through that API, and we actually compute anywhere in the world. If you spilled a drop of oil and it ran to a river and all the way to an ocean, we can plot that whole path up. And then within Power Automate, we were realizing sometimes ArcGIS was sending that back inverted. So the path was starting at the ocean and ending at the other piece. And so we initially were trying to brute force, think about, okay, what's the best way to do this? But eventually we just said, what's the first point? What's the last point? How close is it to my origin? And then determining that's the starting point. And so we were able to do all that in Power Automate and put that into a database and put Power BI on that. And now we have a visual for the users when they drop in a single point of, hey, where would my oil go on this? Now we can tell them exactly where it is and plot it up on a map. And it happens in 30 minutes for 100 sites, which would have taken weeks for people to do previously.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're incredibly powerful, especially for like SMEs or end users and things like that who understand the problem, or like, I just need this data set, but it's over here and IT is blocking me from it. It's like, okay, I can just set up an automation to move that over to me. But I mean, that's one of the biggest recurring problems in our industry is just data siloing, or, you know, having to maneuver around IT instead of with IT a lot of the times. And so, yeah, the crazy part is how many integrations they have, especially Power Automate. Like there's so many, well beyond just, you know, the Microsoft ecosystem too, that it's like, but yeah, I mean, I was looking at using that when we were working together for like our marketing stuff. I set up a form that then went into a Trello board for like marketing post ideas and all this stuff. And it's like, oh, this is awesome. You know, super easy workflow.
Well, and they make it super easy to build custom connectors too. And so another use case was with the EPA, like a client that needed EPA data. And so before it was, you know, here's exactly all the details of my permit, and here's the limits I have. But now you just pop in your permit number, and like it wasn't built into Power Automate, but we have the custom connector, and we just go pull that out, and it's 100% accurate. There's no fat fingering risk. Your permit gets updated. It's all reflected. And so pretty powerful to do. You know, it takes 2 or 3 days to build that custom connector. So really quick to do some stuff.
Yeah. And I guess I technically was, but wasn't talking about like the desktop flows, but I'm actually really interested to hear more about that. I mean, like, so you're saying like that they have some AI stuff you can put on top of it, and those can run on your desktop and run kind of little things internally.
Yeah, so I think the best analog is like Excel recording a macro, but instead of just Excel, it can be your entire desktop. It's that traditionally called RPA. But I think some of the new features they're releasing around some of the Copilot stuff is going to be much more adaptable. And the user can like literally just narrate, I believe, and say, here's what I want it to do. And it'll go draft some of that stuff. And instead of having to say, you know, make my Chrome window 800 pixels wide and go to position, you know, X, Y, and Z. It's using contextual data with AI to know that I need to just go find the title and then, you know, go the next row down or things of that nature. And so it's much more robust and consistent because before RPA was rule based, and when you pair that with statistics, doing both rule based and statistics is crazy powerful.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I think I'm super bullish on these multimodal models and their ability to automate a lot of this stuff. Or like even I don't see a world where OCR isn't replaced by multimodal in the next year or two, just because it's so damn good.
Yeah.
Like I was playing around with extracting data from drilling reports earlier this week, and I was playing around with some of the multimodal models, and it's like, holy shit, man, give it this shitty PDF report, and that's all tables and, you know, fields and tabular data, and being able to have it find exactly what I want in a repeatable fashion and then output that into a JSON blob. It's like, oh man. And I didn't have to write a single piece of code, and I don't have to worry about the OCR messing up or recognizing anything. It's pretty wild. And that's just on documents, right? Like then it becomes this whole other like level of thinking when it's like, oh, I can do this on my entire desktop. Of like, man, how much stuff do we do on a daily basis where it's like I could just automate
even now
clicks and
drags.
and
isn't it with the GPT-4 Omni, you can feed like video into it now and everything too. It's just like, it's gonna be ridiculous.
Well, and I think you're talking before of, you know, how do we coach people on how to use, whether it's AI, large language models, or even the lower level technology. And, you know, I'm still experimenting with some of it, and the use cases are growing, right? Like with the fast evolution of the technology. But one of the things that I actually stood up back in 2019 when I was leading digital transformation, I've seen successfully deployed, and my company's helped do it, is a citizen development program. And it's really creating the boundaries within IT. So instead of working around them and under the shadow IT, if you will, you're working within those confines. And through that, you can help not just educate the how, but also the what, and really help people bridge that gap of, you know, I saw this use case. How is that comparable to my job? And how could I apply an adjacent use case?
Yeah. That's kind of like we were talking about JD Long, like in some enablement, like enabling
empower your employees.
And it's both, right? And so to me, enable is just give me time to go do some of this stuff, and empower is giving the tools and the authority and the support to go do it as well.
Yeah, no, that's I mean that's the whole kind of value prop of most of the low code stuff, right? Is it's like you can live within IT's boundaries, but you can enable the SMEs who understand the root of the problem, the ability to solve that problem or get the data whatever that may be, without them violating any of your
Right.
IT protocols or things like that, so to speak. But it's also just one of those things that the IT side there's no way they can understand all of the problems of every user in a company all of the time. And so it's like the IT guys should be doing the stuff that IT guys know how to do and are good at that the average person doesn't. And the people, the SMEs in the business units should be doing the things that they're good at, not IT. And so this enables that kind of on both sides. And so, like I said, I've been using Zapier and all these no code tools for a long time, and they just keep getting better. Most of the time, Zapier has gotten really shitty lately. Just user interface wise, they just keep shoving stuff into it, and it keeps making it slower. Just like, man, there's no reason. Like, I come here to make this fast, not because I want to sit and wait for a page to load.
To go back to your point around people creating like citizen development, know their process best. I think one of the recognitions I had as I was really strategizing in digital transformation was that people have been creating applications since the dawn of Excel, right? Yeah. They just happen to be shoving it all in there. And
it's a VBA macro.
Yeah, it used to be called Dr. Excel because I would create my own little nasty ones of all sorts of stuff going on in there. And even without macros, you effectively say, here's what my process is. And you put it in a really logical, sequential fashion. So you can put data in and get what you need out without a bunch of kind of extra QA every time. And so I'm seriously seeing what we're doing a lot, not all the cases, but a lot of them is to help people move from 40 different people having 10 different spreadsheets, which is 400 spreadsheets, to creating a single database and a single interface. But what's really makes it super easy for us is they've effectively documented and prototyped the process and the solution, right? So we can now just use a combination of Power Apps for interacting with your data, Power Automate to retrieve it, then Power BI to report and visualize it, which is the three capabilities of Excel previously, right? You got the graphs, you got the data storage, you got the calculators. And so they've just kind of broken the core functionality of Excel into those three tools.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing too, is giving I just completely lost what I was going to say, but we'll move on because that'll come back at the very end of this, but.
So maybe if I can steer in one direction, we talked data lakes before a little bit, and I have a different philosophy on data lakes. There's that big kind of enterprise for the highly consistently used data, but I think the other piece is that it's the Excel data, right? And when you combine the SAP or the Oracle data with Excel, when people start doing a lot of the copy and paste. And so people dream of, oh, I'd love to move all of my Excel data into the cloud so that other people can access to it. But I see it from a value proposition perspective. You could move it into the cloud, or you could just take it one step further, put it in something as simple as a SharePoint list. Right. Say, here's where our single source of truth is. People go and update there and pull it from there. And that achieves 80% of the value from a data lake. Where I think a true data lake, where you've contextualized all your different data sources valuable, is that true ERP or enterprise data, where everybody in the company is trying to ping that. You don't load up the database itself. And you do need that relationships between that. And then everybody else just uses those relationships to kind of marry their data to that.
Yeah. I remembered what I was going to say, but the low code stuff in my mind, to your point of everybody's been building software basically from the beginning. It's this like low code is the perfect way to test out whether it's worth building a full app or workflow around, right? And it's a very quick and easy way to do that. That's the last point I was going to make on that. But
yeah, I would maybe challenge that actually, because I think that where Microsoft's gotten with some of these tools is that they can be your production instance.
No, that's absolutely.
And it's that same kind of strategy around, what's the lowest, the simplest technology. And when it comes to UI, you don't need to go build a React front end or C# or anything. Just build it in Power Apps. But where you need to plug in some additional tools, some AI, you just interact through the database or directly through Power Automate with those tools. And we've created some very sophisticated applications and with a lot of microservices within our toolkit. And it's very fast and very powerful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you brought up just like SharePoint lists. And let's talk about some of that with like the interaction with Power Apps, like in like some of the backends that you have available. I mean, Power Apps can connect to almost kind of any database behind it, but then there's also that makes one's even a SQL Server doesn't make like a premium, app or whatever, and then like you have to pay per user that's using that app. But we've done a couple things where we're writing right to like SharePoint lists, and then that makes it actually free at that point. And
IT workaround.
Where have you seen
it in? Yeah.
But where have you seen like the? Is there an inflection point where like it makes more sense to do it in database versus like a SharePoint list? Or
usually I say the threshold is 100,000 records. If you're going to have 1 million records in a single table, then don't use SharePoint.
Yeah.
But I think where it really depends on the magnitude of the users as well. If you're going to have 5 or 10 users maintaining, 1,000 or 2,000 row record, then use SharePoint.
Yeah.
But if you're effectively creating an enterprise application, you just want to do it for 1/10 of the cost and 1/10 of the time, then go use the Dataverse or the SQL or whatever is your database of choice. And you can build your business rules in there. And we have some clever ways of doing SharePoint relationships just through IDs and whatnot. But you can actually put in database relationships into Dataverse like you would a normal SQL table. And so that allows you to really drive much better data consistency and do a lot more efficient development by leveraging a lot of those business rules and relationships and whatnot. And so we tend to do more and more now with Dataverse. The threshold we have to get through is the pay per user. But if you're saving $100K a year on software and on the development, because we're replacing 6-figure softwares probably once or twice a quarter across our portfolio of clients. And so you're using 90% or 10% of the software. You put data in, you got to report out.
Yeah.
Sure, they had some other bells and whistles. You didn't need it, and so let's just replace that with a database.
Cool. Now that's these things are so powerful.
Like
at the end of the day, they really are.
And I came to it early in 2019. We're using this in the enterprise, and it was just a few years before that. But it's really about that clever application of technology. And like 99% of Power Apps I see is a single, maybe 2 screens, and it's like a form, and it's like, okay, we're actually building rich interactive apps. And so I have to fight that stigma a little bit at times, but as soon as I give that demo, people get pretty excited.
Yeah, it can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make
exactly
them, right? Like that's the beauty of them
and
on both sides.
They give us guardrails, right? And so sometimes we'll build something and we try to shove too much into one screen or connect too much to it, and we just prototype and find other ways to approach it. And so I think we had like probably 20 layers in one, and it was a combination of like seeing all the data and then also editing the data. And so we just split that into see the data and edit the data. And that drastically improved performance.
Can you help me and probably people listening grok what is the Dataverse? Because it seems it's very like broad. Like when I think about it, or I've interacted with it. I know I have, but it's like kind of like
so. Probably everybody asks has a slightly different definition, but I just see it as an Azure SQL table, and so they've created an abstraction layer between traditional database development and citizen developers. So now it feels as simple as just adding columns in an Excel or SharePoint list. But you can start to use the more and more advanced features over time, like the relationships and whatnot. But you are actually using Azure SQL. And so the performance of the cloud-based and retrieving, I think the most we've shoved into a database is 1.5 million records.
Okay.
But no issues at all with that. And
you
can just keep going. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then, again, I think it's all intertwined there too, but how much have you done or interacted with Dynamics? Because again, even that, like at first I thought it was a CRM, but then but then I hear about, but then there's like, but then there's massive like company, like I'm pretty sure Oventive uses it as their ERP.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's an option. Like it's like,
I check in on it every kind of 18 months, if you will. And you're 100% right. Like 5 years ago, it's like super clunky, terrible UI. Like, why would I ever use this?
Microsoft in general, right? Like Teams suck. Now Teams,
prototyping, right? They've got that agile mindset. But I'm seeing the same thing, and both in the SMB space where small, medium businesses are using their entire warehousing, inventory, financials, all in Dynamics, and seeing more and more of it used at the enterprise level. And it's funny what people end up picking. Like, I saw one major midstream operator pick it up just for a CRM. It's like, who are your CRMs that you're having to interact with? But
yeah,
seemed like more like a contact list, but not neither here nor there. But certainly seen that capability build for sure. The challenge with a lot of these ERPs though is you're so ingrained in your day-to-day business that people are really hesitant to make a jump.
Yeah, that's a hard software sell.
People spend billions of dollars on SAP over a decade, and it's like, how do you spend this much on a single software application? So you won't find me giving any sympathy towards SAP, or any votes for it. But it has a time and a place. But people have tried to use it in way too many ways, and they've tried to build that vision of a single database.
Well, SAP, to their credit, has made it very configurable. And again, no two implementations are the same. So they've made a lot of consultancies very rich too.
Definitely.
That's the nuance of it, right? Is like, if you're trying to be everything to everybody, you're nothing to nobody until you have the custom development for your thing.
But once you're there, you're
right.
So
but when you're in it,
good luck getting off it.
It is a sticky thing. No, those are ERPs are tricky, man. Bobby and I used a low code ERP at our prior company, and they've gotten even better. It was QuickBase. But it's like having that flexibility of like, oh, I need to add this entirely new process to my company. Is really nice. But I'm sure Microsoft does a lot to make it nice and integrated across everything, and then Power Apps on top of that. So
the problem is the users just end up coming and say, why can't I do this here? I mean, like what Salesforce was a CRM, and now it does all these things and QuickBase. But again, at some point it comes back, it's a database, right? Like I'm just
there's just relational database.
Create these relations and stuff in the background, and then why can't I do whatever the hell I want my business within this?
Right. So. Well, and it goes back to that conversation where the decision tree now is, what can I use in my Microsoft stack that I have, and then go look elsewhere? And the answer is quite a bit. More and more so. So it's very powerful.
What's the technology in the Power Platform that people are sleeping on?
That's a good question.
Define sleeping on. Elaborate what you mean on that. Like not really being used, or
not really being used, or not
being talked about.
Or talked about.
Powerful.
It's probably, for me, it's just the application of the technologies, right? I think the technologies are not terribly complicated. It's more, and people are still using a Power App just to as a form into a database. They're not using it as a rich application. They're using Power Automate for moving data between two databases and doing a little post-processing, or that ETL, if you will. They're not cleverly combining 2 or 3 data sources and helping extract new insights. Power BI, we haven't really talked about that much, but that was probably the most adopted by citizen developers. It's simple. It feels like Excel. It's drag and drop. But people are using it to just report out on numbers. They're not using it for true analytics. And I don't even mean like put machine learning in there. It's just like know what your question is and put the only visuals to help you answer that question versus just like a bunch of cards and stats. But then of course, once you know what your question is and you're able to prototype what you're looking for, then it's easier to start to layer in more and more of the automated analytics on top.
Okay. So bringing up Power BI, because again, I don't know why I didn't think about that. I'm thinking about, at least through my conversations, like, clearly you're using Power BI, but I feel like a lot of it is more like the processing, like getting data into a database. But how much, where do you see him, say, with Power BI versus Spotfire and adoption? Are you seeing it going that way? Or are people still pretty sticking to Spotfire, or is it both?
Yeah. So back in 2019, I actually ran a study to figure out for my digital transformation, which one we'll want to use. And so Spotfire was the native one. The reservoir engineers and production engineers were most comfortable with that. But what we found was Spotfire is much better for more complex, larger data sets. And Power BI is better for someone that's used to Excel and needs to make that jump. And so if like Power BI has more and more of this, but at the time it was, if you want to go write some Python code to help process your data, use Spotfire. But as a small business owner, I looked at it and
it's not
Power BI is free until you want to publish, and then it's only $10 a month. And from going from no Power BI instance to having one is 10 minutes if you have a Microsoft account. And so whereas Spotfire,
it's a lot bigger,
originally standing up your own nodes, and now it's the cloud-based stuff. And so There's a big hurdle to go into that for both the users and from an IT perspective. And obviously, Microsoft's really trying to expand and extend that capability with, you brought up Fabric. And so some of the cool things we're doing to do kind of a pseudo data lake, if you will, is create data flows. And that's just a way to like publish a data set that other people can hit, whether that's with Power Automate or with Power BIs. And now they've got some data marts, which we've only played with a little bit, but
because those are Azure SQL backend, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you can actually hit those data marts from Spotfire as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And so they're really broadening out the capabilities within their ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so I would generally say, like, unless you're just an expert Spotfire user, if you're starting from scratch, do Power BI. And then if you hit those ceilings somewhere, particularly on data density or something around that, then maybe look at alternative solutions.
Yeah, I've got I tend to agree with that experience. I think engineers like Spotfire because we're used to looking at frac stages and drilling report. We're used to looking at high density time series data.
Yeah.
And that's honestly my only complaint about Power BI is they don't have a great way to do that. But then there's really an honest conversation of, should Power BI have that natively, at least, capability, or should it not? Because it's a BI tool. It's not necessarily like or at least that's what they brand it as. But it's like, instead of, like, you can do that in Power BI, but I'm gonna have to write my own Plotly dashboard in Python to get it to look how I want it, instead of dealing with all the crap that Power BI, like all the concatenation and categorization and stuff that they kind of force you into with time series data and stuff like that. But I completely agree with you, especially if you've used Microsoft products at all. Like, Power BI is a very easy intro, especially comparatively to like Spotfire, right? Like, Spotfire can do a lot, but it's also harder to, I think the hardest part is going from Spotfire to Power BI because you expect all this stuff.
All the tools. Yeah. Even compared to Excel, there's less like customization. It seems like at first glance in Power BI.
And it's gotten a lot better. I mean, like we said earlier, everything Microsoft, they continually improve the products. They get to where they're, definitely world class or up there. But I guess that's kind of my understanding of Fabric now is kind of Fabric is enabling like that more analyst type person to start doing some of the data engineering and everything, right? I mean, like it's moving back up the stream. And I mean, is it at the point now? I mean, I guess Power BI data sets or semantic models, they call them now, or is it data flows? Like, so are those able to be authored, say with like Power Query, or, because I mean, I think that'd be a huge thing if you were able to kind of author an end-to-end, ETL essentially, and it landed in a data mart or like a database, but you're able to do that ETL with like Power Query. I think it'd be super powerful.
Yeah, and it is. That's exactly what you can do. And sometimes you can build it. They've got a lot of pre-configured steps. So it's just like, dedupe my data, sort it by this, and change the data type and things of that nature. You can pop open the advanced editor and you can just write all that code. And so, I've seen a really strong bias from traditional full stack developers against anything low code, but we're trending towards what I would describe as fusion development. And so very similar to a lot of times, if you're a full stack developer and you're not learning React, you're becoming obsolete, then I'd say it's the same thing for low code, because the guy that is using it is going to create higher quality products faster without it.
Yeah. And that's what I've always, Power Query is probably my favorite part of the whole platform. It's just, again, it's the drag drop, but the fact that it creates the code is a huge, it's always been a big deal for me.
Yeah.
Because then it gives some of that flexibility. Like, because even like sometimes if you want to have a parameterized like date, like create a filter, well, I just create the filter with my little drop down, but then I can go into the code and plop in my parameterized date into that code that it generated.
Or you copy it from one place into another. A lot of times I need to like transform a data set and then like collapse it down. So I just like have the data set in one query, copy that code and then paste it over here and then just like collapse it and transform it. So,
exactly.
Like crazy fast. Yeah. Just like every time we like try something new, it's like, oh, that was way easier than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Well, it makes it easier to learn too, right? Because I'm very visual. I'm a very visual learner. And like, that's what I liked. It took a minute to get used to in Power BI because everything's, different than Spotfire. But the fact that you can do everything either through code or through a button, like pretty much on everything is incredible, because like, hey, I'll do it through the button and then I'll go look at the code so I understand what it's doing. And now I've just learned how to now code that thing without spending a ton of time having to actually figure out how to code it. Right.
Yeah.
And then you get more advanced and you can start stringing those together into the query and all of that stuff. But
I feel like you've gone down this rabbit hole, and I did some time ago as well, of pagination in Power BI. So if you're hitting an API call and you're only getting 100 records at a time and you have to paginate through it, that is the one thing that is like, okay, you have to get in the code and get a little bit clever with some of them, especially for the APIs that are not as rich and telling you the pages.
My favorite workaround for I've still got that link stored in I've got a Power BI OneNote notebook of just like random shit that I have come across that I'm like, oh man, I'll use this again a lot. And for the pagination, it's essentially you just create a blank table. You use the functions to create, whatever the offset and limits are for your pagination. And then you just loop the call. You put a variable in the call that is going and calling that table, and then it just loops through. But it's the most like backwards way to possibly do that. And you could just write a loop that actually does it like it's supposed to.
Yeah. We might have invested a little bit more time and done the loop, but it takes definitely, it was a 10 YouTube kind of day.
Right. But that's the cool part about it, right? Is it's like, if you want to do the full custom code, you can. If you want to figure out the GUI workaround way to do it, you can also do that.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. One thing I did Power Query I was particularly proud of, and it wasn't even that big of an impact, but like we use DBT for our transformations on top of Snowflake, but it generates documentation, and they have a GraphQL API that you can actually, the same information you can see on their documentation website it generates, you can go get it from their GraphQL API. But I mean, there's no GraphQL API button in Power BI. But again, because like you have the flexibility through there, like was basically able to create like the post request within the Power Query and like post that. And then I think it needed a bearer token too, because again, you can hit some APIs, but it's not super robust.
Right.
But again, basically because you can create like a curl request or whatever, post request from within there, it was able to feed all the headers and everything, and boom, send it, and then it got the response back, and then you can parse it from there.
Yeah.
But I mean, it opens up a lot of possibilities.
100%. Yeah.
Especially once you learn how to call APIs within it, and you're like, oh man, this is awesome.
In my background is mechanical engineering, right? And I did petroleum engineering for 8 years, but I consider myself a fairly proficient developer. I will say APIs were like one of those steeper learning curves. I can do a lot of it pretty natively, but once you crack it, it is so powerful.
No, that's the annoying part is it's like, I can do it over here in Postman all day long, but getting it into Power BI how I need it.
Yeah, because Postman has all the different languages, but it doesn't give you the nice little, here's how you do it in Power BI.
Right.
So hack together like 3 different blog posts in a Indian YouTube video. And
but you get it there. And then that's why you hire experts for the niche things that are more complex and you want like to truly productionalize.
Yeah, that's where I was going with like the whole prototype stuff. Even if it's not like a fully blown, full stack, custom coded thing, it's like, hey, here's my hacky, shitty way of calling this API. Make it better. Give it to. But giving something to a developer that's already there and they can use it is like it's another hack cheat code in my opinion. Like especially for streamlining development, right?
And even Excel does a good job at
100%.
that. And so a lot of times when we're working with customers and trying to understand their process and their data, it's just data dump all your Excels on me. And we can come back, 30-minute discussion, data dump on me, and we've got 80% of the use case framed up after that. And so that kind of ironing out the process and the data and whatnot and prototyping it, whether it's Excel or otherwise, makes it so much easier to create some really high quality apps quickly.
No, for sure. That's until you've gone through the development cycle where you go through all of your tasks and items and don't include mockups and then get the results back. And it's like, oh, well, they did the function that you asked them for, but they didn't do it in an intuitive way or put the button in the right spot or like, I'd try every single time I have anything that has to do with the front end to have a mockup with it, just because it will save you so much time and headache all day long.
Well, that's usually the first step. It's like, hey, we mapped out your process, we've optimized it. Here's the data tables we're planning on. And then the first step of development is there's not a single button here that works, but here's what I think it should look like. And you usually have that 10% changes, but by just ironing that out, your development cycles thereafter are so much faster.
Yeah, big time.
Damn, we're already over an hour. That was fast.
Yeah. Always does.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's also been a minute. Thanks for everybody for dealing with us for travels in summer. We missed an episode last week, but
it's good to get back in the studio too.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. You haven't been in person in a minute.
Yeah.
It's good to see you. But we'll jump into the speed round and really get crazy.
Okay. Should I hop out?
No. We'll just ask you random quick answer questions.
Okay.
I think I know the answer to this question based off all these conversations, but what's your favorite cloud?
Yeah, Microsoft. But it goes back to what we were saying, that it's use what you know, right? There's not a perfect one out there. They have pros and cons.
Yeah, no, for sure. Favorite, either like social, like just someone interesting, either in the tech and energy space that you follow that is worth following, or we can do a favorite like book or good book recommendations that you've either.
Well, obviously, I follow Colin McClellan.
Don't tell him that. He doesn't need any more of that.
Admittedly, I probably don't do that much on the social side. The way I educate myself is I don't like to read just one book over 3 or 4 weeks. I like to read 50 articles and then kind of splice together. And so I'm a much more, I get on socials, but I'm just looking for educational content a lot of times.
Lurking. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
that's passive engagement.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's what
I was
for now.
Forever. And now I'm a podcaster. And
just use ChatGPT to generate all your blog posts.
Yeah. What's your favorite non-Microsoft technology?
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
I mean, my iPhone.
Yeah. Fair enough.
What about any kind of software or Python libraries or anything like that?
Yeah, admittedly, ChatGPT has really become a critical arsenal. I've been paying the pro version or premium version for about a year, 18 months. And, I feel like it was a little bit of a learning curve, probably even in college, to learn to go to Google every day just to ask it questions. And now that was only like when I didn't know something. Now it's more of like, not when I have a question, but when I have a task, I have to think about, can I get ChatGPT to do this? And so you talked about there's a learning curve there, but that's definitely a critical tool in my arsenal.
Yeah, no, I had that SP workshop last week. Shout out to Kyle in the SP OKC group. But that was one of the things that I talked about was like, this is an iterative thing. You have to learn how to use it, just like you learned how to Google. It's the same thing, but also interrupting just teaching yourself to be like, hey, can GPT help me or do this completely? Like just getting that into your brain and starting to think that way can completely change how much you're able to do with it. And just messing around and finding F around and find out and see.
And the way I started was the task that I tend to avoid. I don't like doing.
Yeah.
I started just having it do the heavy load and it was solving my pain points. And then I kind of allowed it to creep into other things. And it's just can do higher quality things faster.
Yeah.
How could you not?
And it just keeps getting better.
Yeah. I haven't quite gotten into the habit of just talking to it on a daily basis. It's there.
Yeah.
But I think it would drive my wife nuts down the hallway. So I avoid doing that one.
Colin swears by it. Like he'll go on a walk or a workout or whatever, and he'll just have his AirPods in and just talk to her, whatever its name is. Fake Scarlett Johansson voice. But it's, it logs everything, right?
Yeah.
So it's just in your chat. And I was like, damn, that's a crazy way to think about being able to use this for productivity all of the time.
Yeah.
Like record conversations that you're having with people and just transcribe them, right? Just to have that. We were talking about that with an operator the other day. Like, why isn't every operator recording and transcribing all their AARs? Because I guarantee you what's in the PowerPoints of the AARs is it's
whatever, much more meaningful conversation.
The contextualized information is in that conversation in that room. And it's like, now there's no reason we shouldn't be doing that on all of them, because the problem is the answers to the problems that you're actually trying to solve are in that conversation, not in the deck per se, like the details about it.
Well, and the Collide product, you're allowed to like search videos and things of that nature, right? And so having that fully contextualize, you have a future question, say, tell me about a previous after action review that you had this scenario. So you go back and learn from that as you're planning the next job.
Exactly.
So yeah, that'd be crazy powerful.
Yeah. Well, there's just so much. I mean, there's so much information that gets passed around at the field level, right? Like with consultants, with drilling consultants, with whoever, of like, oh yeah, at this depth, you're going to get this gas kick. So be careful. This is how we mitigate that. Same thing on the frac side, right? But it's like none of that ever gets written down anywhere.
In the place where everyone knows
where
where to find it.
Where it's useful at least.
Yeah. Or don't even know where to look at.
We got one more. Let's do favorite board or video game.
Lately, I've been mostly playing Destiny 2. It's like for the last 5 years, it's the only game I play on my Xbox. It's like I've got a little bit of time, need to recharge the batteries, and so I'll go play that. But all time, easily Halo 3.
Yes.
It was like definitely my college one, and it was the one that I could have some fun with some of my buddies in college, but they would all get so mad at me because it'd be like 25-4 and it's Josh versus 3 other people. And they're like, there's no way you had that many beers, but whatever.
Pretty good on that. What's your weapon of choice? The battle rifle or the sniper? Or
definitely the battle rifle with the rechargeable little, I can't remember what it's called now. It's been so long since I played. Strip your shield with a little gun and then a single battle shot rifle onto the head.
Whenever my roommate in college turned me on to the whole like battle rifle headshot. And it's like, oh shit, that's why I was dying so fast. Like that was such like a life hack when you were playing that game. It was like,
and it had like an auto finding like for the actual headshot, like it gravitated towards it. So I could just sweep my my cursor across the screen and like pull the trigger at approximately the right time and headshot.
Close enough. Right. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, cool, man. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming. It's been a pleasure. How do people find you, get in touch with you if they want to chat?
Easiest thing is our website. It's ascension-team.com. We've been going through a rebranding, so call to act solutions and consulting now. Realize that, we're not just consultants and not just selling a PowerPoint deck. We're great value. And so I wanted to put the solutions in there, but
nice.
Or look us up, me or us up on LinkedIn. Got a pretty sizable following and growing there.
Great. Spell your last name for everybody.
It's like Politte, but with 2 T's. So Politte.
Cool. Yeah. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having
it's
me.
Good seeing you.
Great.